Very often we start somehow. My pleasure, my honor, and so forth. And I was thinking, it really means that. For me, that means also it is a joy. Every single time something happens to me when I see their eyes, when I can meet them. So when I was given this wonderful, honor to introduce, I was asking how long do I have time? What's the time limit? Because I could really continue and read. Okay, this is demonstration. This is about the cosmic planes, but you know, there's no words that can express that. That's why I would like to do this way. Sheldon and Halina, please, could you come here? Could you please stand here? You know that the name, thank you. The name is carrying something about the soul. So her name in this life is Halina, and he's Sheldon. Halina means Helios, or the salt of earth. Sheldon means hopes held on. These names are more about who they are. Look deeply in their eyes. And meet the soul. These two souls have come together to work this time. If we cover that one, what is left, is there the same thing? Or if we cover that one? No, that is the mystery of the heart. Our conference could not be without them, because they are really the ones that this heart could not beat. They are carrying something in them, and that's why I don't want to destroy that in my words. That is the thing. So we welcome you into our hearts.
And now I have to introduce the two of them on Saturday.
All right, yeah, that's right. That's good.
Thank you, Tilly.
Get his glasses.
Well, good afternoon, everyone.
Your mic.
I'm not working. Now, we have to be given some extra minutes because we have a long presentation, and it's two of us. So, anyway, I'll start. All right, wonderful. Our primary goal for this presentation. All right. Oh, here. Hey, it works.
Yeah.
Okay, so in the meantime, this is good because we don't need him for 2 minutes. So everything works out in the great plan, in the great scheme of things. All right. Our primary goal for this presentation is to evoke a felt sense of the Christ presence. And not only the presence, but also the consciousness. And a felt sense of humanity's triumph. This is a tall order when we're talking about the triumph in Aquarius, because really we're talking about a long progression from now until, actually, really it started way back. And we began to get the inkling several hundred years ago. And as Michael said, the fullness of Aquarius, it's really not until 2117, but that's the fullness. We are already in the forefront of these energies. And part of our goal will be to show you what is happening on the planet today that is speaking to this. So this is one thing. Secondly, we want to illustrate some spiritual practices which can evoke the Christ consciousness. And it's not the traditional spiritual practices that we know. We'll tell you what those are. And they're different. And they use the mind and the heart and the heart and the mind. So we'd like to begin our presentation by creating a sacred space. And it's already here. I can feel it. And I invite you to create a field of love simply by the thought of it and simply by the feeling of it as it comes through the heart, and allow that to come into the room. Beautiful. I can feel the waves. It's so beautiful. And now we want to play a song for you that will play both now and at the end that invokes through words the Christ in you, the Christ in us, the Christ all around us.
Of moon, splendor of fire, I arise today through the strength of heaven, light of sun, radiance of moon, splendor of fire, speed of lightning, swiftness of wind, depth of the sea, stability of earth, firmness of rock. I arise today through God's strength to pilot me, God's eye to look before me, God's wisdom to guide me, God's way to lie before me, God's shield to protect me from all who shall wish me ill, afar and anear, alone and in a multitude.
Christ is the foremost and highest expression of earth-chain humanity. He stands at the end point. He is the culmination of the Aquarian dispensation. He stands both as a lighted beacon and as a great magnet. He calls us, he draws us, and pulls us to that full expression. He is our potential. And it is Christ who is inaugurating and inspiriting the Aquarian ideals, ideas, positive visions, and movements. Christ is our present world teacher. He is the head of the spiritual hierarchy. And he is the teacher alike of angels and men. And I have often asked, how did Christ do it? How did he achieve this present position so quickly, so far ahead of the rest of us? And DK says that he is so identified with divine love and then embodied that divine love that he became love itself. And so now he's known as the avatar of love. And I think that is a huge clue for us. How did he attain that? That's a huge clue. So in this solar system, the program, the curriculum that we are needing to follow and live is love, capital L, capital O, capital V, capital E. Christ is thus fulfilling God's intention for this great cycle of our current solar system. And he said a great phrase, "Lo, I am with you all the days, even unto the end of the age."
We have a couple of, you might say, propositions we want to put forth, which I think will be familiar to most of you, but it builds on some of the talks we had earlier in the day. One of the main ones is that the Christ consciousness is an energy. I like that. Yes, there's a little hum here. Available, I think, to all of us. Now, we might say we have to be prepared for its reception, but I think most of us have had a touch of this or a taste of this, so we know what it's like when it's evoked in us. And for me, that music we played does it. There are many things that do it. As a matter of fact, what we are going to be talking about today has to do with those ideas or ideals or movements or positive visions, which when you see them, they evoke a sense of Christ consciousness. There's a resonance, right? You say, there's something about deep love for all of humanity in this, and there's a touch of the will in that you feel like this must be done. This is what we must do. So there's so many things going on today in the world, and some of you are students of world affairs, so this will be familiar to you, and we could say much more than what we have here, but we want just to highlight some things for the following reason. One is to bring hope. My dad told me that Sheldon means hope's held on, so I thought that's very good. Thanks, Dad. I appreciate that. But the notion is that when we think about some of these movements, let's say, or ideas that are already happening in the world today, by thinking about them, by visualizing their complete manifestation, praying about them, we strengthen them. And even though they may not be complete reality today, or even though they may be happening just in one corner of the planet, the fact that they seize us in this way, and we think about it, we strengthen the potential for it to overtake the forces of materialism, separatism, and fear. Now, to do this requires in us to use just a tiny bit of esoteric thinking, you might say, development of that faculty of mind that we call the son of mind, or the higher mind, or the soul, or the mind that was in Christ. Now, you all know what the concrete mind is, the part that analyzes and discriminates. This is a very important development for all of us to have. Most of us have experienced through higher education a bit about the abstract mind, the ability to summarize, from many into one. But the middle part of the mind, the son of mind, sometimes gets skipped, does not get developed. But when it does, it leads to some marvelous perceptions and capabilities to register what's going on in the world today, as well as the Christ consciousness. Just a word from DK about this. He says, the Christ consciousness is an evolutionary force. It focused itself at the person of the Christ in a matter hitherto unknown, And this is the potency latent in every human heart, which was described by St. Paul as Christ in you, the hope of glory, and is that which under evolutionary law brings a person eventually into the kingdom of God and unto the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. So, as we touch into this, and as we register those events happening in our culture today, we're strengthened and those events are strengthened. And what we're going to propose is that the triumph of humanity in Aquarius has to do first with the building of soul cultures in various places, and they're already being built, and eventually, at some point in the more distant future, the full-blown Aquarian civilization, which will see it writ large.
Okay, so I think we need to go into the first one.
Okay, yeah. All right. So what we're going to do now is talk about some ideas or ideals or movements or positive visions, all of which you know about. So this is a kind of a training in spiritual recognition, you might say, and hopefully in joyous recognition of what's going on today on the planet. So an obvious one here, I think, for many people is the reemergence today in our contemporary culture of the feminine archetype. We see this in several ways. The beginning ascendancy of the values of love, of cooperation, of support, of compassion, of the goodwill, of nurture, of nature, and right human relations. A mixture of principles, yes, and values, but those are coming to be talked about more and more, and the lack thereof is what is causing, to some degree, the overlay of materialism, separateness, and fear. The second thing I want to mention, and we'll try to show you a short vignette of, is the importance of the stature of women and how that relates to contemporary culture. So we have a couple of vignettes from a DVD that's done by Hazel Henderson. We'll tell you more about it in a minute, called Ethical Markets. We take this first one, which is a couple of words from Brienne Eisler, who wrote this book, Chalice and the Blade. But she's talking a bit about the status of women and how that relates to the well-being of everyone in the culture.
All traditional societies, there is actually...
This is good too, but we're gonna, she comes later maybe. Well, you know, we can move around here, it's all right, we'll just, If that's where it is, I can go there, Lars. A bit of the third ray here, so I'm quite adaptable. Yeah. We'll see what comes up next.
Because I look at the time, it's 20 after.
Yeah, I see that already, yeah.
25
after, yeah.
Within all traditional societies, there is actually a sense of enoughness, and it's fascinating.
One of the things that's so Rhea and I will come on in a moment. We'll see how she emerges. One of the other things, though, that we're all familiar with, and I think John's music kind of keys us into this, but boy, Jose got me thinking about this as well. This is the wisdom of native peoples who are poor, peoples of the South. There is a lot of thinking and thought that comes through today that is seeping into the culture. And this first one that we have right now by Rebecca Adams is a short piece talking about, in the native peoples, the principle of enoughness, or as Lynn Twist said last year, sufficiency.
So since you have that one.
So we'll see how...
and when you look at the money economics of it,
well, that's good too.
It is.
Yeah, no, I like that. That's, no, I tell you.
Okay.
No, it's all good.
Otherwise, we could just skip.
It's all one piece.
yes,
It's all
there's
one
an
piece.
enormous...
Yeah, it's all right piece. I'll tell you about that one as well, but I'm going to wait. We'll get one more round here. That's all right. But,
Oh, well.
the joys of moving from a DVD to something else, So.
We have a lot more to show, so if you can't get that one, Lars, let's just move on to the next one.
in nursing homes and other places. I think there's a whole potential economy out there.
Yeah. This is Rebecca Adams now.
Within all traditional societies,
Adamson.
there is actually a sense of enoughness. And it's fascinating. From the most remote Alaska village to the most remote San
Keep it going. Sure.
campfire, I have been in places where we basically are going to eat what we hunt. And beavers mate for life. And one time we were in a village and one of the fellows shot a beaver and we cooked it and we were eating it. Well, the mate came out looking for him. At that moment, you have more respect for the life that you took so that you could survive than any kind of giving of thanks. But while the mate is looking for its partner, one of the kids picked up a gun and was going to go get it. Every single elder in the village was like, no, we have enough, we have enough. And it is an absolutely operating principle that I've called enoughness. I think that there's wisdom within all of these societies that have sustained themselves over generations upon generations for 20, 30, 40,000 years with a sustainable principle that I would absolutely say is enoughness. We can do this. I know community economics can once again use these ancient principles and have capital connect to community.
Author and social scientist Rian Eis.
This is okay. This is
Okay,
depends.
Let's go on. Okay.
Well, it's a
Okay,
dance.
Lars, then set us up for Vandana Shiva. Let's skip the time dollars with Edgar Khan. I'll just talk about that. And then have us queued up for Vandana Shiva.
Let me just say one word about what Rian Eisler was saying. This is not a new story to most of us, but in all the UN studies that go on, they will take a look at indicators of well-being in society. This has to do with health, longevity, childbirth, children dying, when they die, etc. And what you find, of course, is that where the status of women is high, those indicators are all off the chart is too strong, but it's much higher. She compares Kuwait, which has the same basic GNP as France. Mm-hmm. And she'll say, but take a look now at these other indicators of well-being, and you see a huge difference, and primarily attributable to the fact the status of women, or what we're going to talk about in a minute, the love economy, is not valued. So that was her point. Thank you very much. Yeah.
We are just going to adapt our way through this. All right, so the next point, as Sheldon mentioned, is the love economy. This is a phrase coined by Hazel Henderson, and she's an Aquarian economist of the solar age. She was the creator of the socially responsible investing movement and is now producing a television series called Ethical Markets. So we have a couple of these clips are from that tape. Okay, so the next positive vision where we see Christ consciousness actually transforming our contemporary culture is by recognizing the values of the labors of love. So what she calls the love economy. And this is where love is entering the third aspect of divinity or economics. This work is done largely by women, for example, in child rearing or in volunteerism. You see a lot of that here. But it's not counted today in terms of our economic measures. Now, the fact that we don't count it is a sign that it doesn't count. And some economists have calculated that if they were to add up all the love labor that is being done on the planet today, it would amount to $14 trillion. Imagine that amount. It's hard to imagine that amount of money. So one example that we're not going to show because of time is what is called the emergence of time dollars. And this is a form of barter or exchange. It's where people don't have a lot of money necessarily, but they have time. So they exchange their services in terms of time. And it's wonderful to see this happen and the kind of doors it's opening in people's lives. Okay, so the next one that we'll talk about is by a woman named Vandana Shiva. She's another example of an idea which is growing into a movement. She is a highly educated woman. When you hear her, just the quality of her soul and her appearance is so beautiful, so worldly, motherly. She goes to court, she goes to the World Trade Organizations to uphold laws, fight for the poor, fight for the Aquarian concept of freedom, where large corporations were trying to take what is a part of the earth, seeds, and give them back to the people because they were saying that now these seeds are patented and you can't have them. I mean, how ridiculous is that? So she's fighting for people to have these basic human rights and freedoms, which is, again, an Aquarian concept. And she really fights for the undervaluing of the role of women in development and the economy. So I see her as one of the leaders on a planet that is breaking the back of materialism. All right, so let's play that one.
Spain, and Korea. Happiness is not directly proportional to income, but it can be a result of self-sufficiency. Small-scale farmers are a perfect example of this, though they are not often recognized for their contributions to the economy.
I think one of the biggest illusions of our times is that human welfare and human well-being comes out of the money that is a pure fiction. A piece of paper that says, I promise to give the bearer goods worth whatever.
Environmental activist and change agent Dr. Vandana Shiva has been at the forefront of the global movement to protect farmers all over Asia and Central America.
Our organization's main work is to save biodiversity, native seeds with farmers' communities and create community seed banks. We also work with them to promote organic farming. I have seen well-fed communities with no hunger, no thirst, no poverty, with no cash economy, and they are very, very poor people. So you can have hunger with lots of cash flow and zero hunger with no cash flow. I think it's time for us to turn to those other economies of nature and sustenance. And in the sustenance economy, it's primarily women who play a very, very big role. Those other economies are what keep life going on this planet. Those are the ones that get rid of hunger, that get rid of thirst, that get rid of alienation, that get rid of insecurity. I have never seen terrorism and extremism emerge in societies where people were left their freedoms to generate their livelihoods and provide for themselves.
Okay, yeah, I mean, yeah. This is a remarkable person, as Lena said. We've seen her a couple of times, and if you get a chance, she's doing some great things on the planet. But this is just an example of somebody who represents a movement. And this is the entry, of Lena was saying, of love into the economic realm. And there's so many different ways in which this is happening. I want to say just a couple of words about the new philanthropy. And this is not that new, but the way that philanthropy is being administered today is quite interesting. On the one hand, you have some very wealthy people. You all saw that Time Magazine Persons of the Year, Melinda and Bill Gates and Bono. Well, if you don't, get back to that issue. It's an incredible story, but basically joining forces to really take on some of the fundamental problems in the world today. The point of the article, though, is really about how money is being used to solve specific problems in a responsible, practical way. The quote was, "Think globally, but act carefully, act responsibly, act practically." So there's a call for a return on your investment in terms of the well-being actually happening for people. So money not being given to governments necessarily, but to local groups, and for them to take responsibility for bettering their own lives, to become self-sufficient. Bill Clinton, as you know, has the global initiative. He's trying to serve as a broker for people who have money and for people who have great projects, and putting them together with the same demand that if you don't do something with, you can't just come to the conference year after year. If you don't do something, you're not invited back, which is one nice thing. But then he has a staff of people who follow through on the commitments of the money. So what we see here is the beginning use of money in very specific, constructive ways. One more small point that's not so small, actually. When you think about the Christ consciousness as affecting people and how they work together in groups. I mean, all of us have some sort of organizational life, and no work gets done today without group effort, group endeavor, and hopefully some group consciousness. So it's just so obvious. Don't need to belabor the point, but a lot of the work that people in our line of work do is to help people work together more effectively so they can learn to be more respectful, conscious of one another's strengths, utilizing those strengths to the best end. I also mentioned something I'm sure that Steve and others will talk about, but it's the emergence of all of these, I think what Lynn Twist called last year, social profit groups, NGOs, but she didn't like the word N, so it was more of a, for social profit. Build all these groups, 30,000 at least there are now that are associated around the planet. Philip was talking about the new group of world servers. Some of these groups are that. And as they grow in power and stature, so large is their impact today, Paul Hawken talked about them at a conference last year as the fourth force, you might say, on the planet. This is a huge voice of public opinion. We are not that far, I don't think, from folks like this and us standing up to say, you know what? Here's what needs to happen for the good of all on this planet. So that is an emerging movement, building of group consciousness.
Okay, so the next topic we'd like to cover is called the soul in business. This is, from our perspective, this is Christ consciousness as the loving will that is also transforming our contemporary culture. The Aquarian leadership today is beginning to address not only building soul-based cultures, this has been around for a while, but what has been lacking is the purpose of business itself. It literally has been inverted. It's the serving of one small constituency, which has often been named the shareholder, rather than a larger grouping, which is called the stakeholder. And that includes not only the shareholders, it includes the community, it includes the employees, it includes the environment. It includes more of the subtle things like relationships with each other and the planet. So this is, there are two CEOs that we saw in reference in What is Enlightenment magazine. And this is the issue 28, March, May 2005. And the title, if you can't see this, says, Will Big Business Save the World? The word destroy is crossed out and it says save the world. Two examples of CEOs. When you listen to some of these quotes, you will recognize them as people that could be in this room. And so clearly they are people on the forefront of shifting the paradigm. Roger Sallant, CEO of Plug Power, that's one of the first electric fuel cell companies, has created an organization that feels different, that has an energy that is palpable. And he says, work at Plug Power is not your job or my job, it's our job. And that's how people become enlisted when we're working together. It's what happens when you think of yourself as having no boundaries, when you think of yourself as working in a field of connection and consciousness. In creating this organization, he said, I believe that people want the truth. They want to learn. They want to grow. They want to be a part of a community and with a shared inspirational vision. And this is so beautiful. He says, when you try to practice these principles, somehow the universe reaches out to you and gives you the insights that guide you at an intuitional level. Isn't that profound? That is a CEO. Okay, and one more. This man is the president of Unilever Best Foods in Asia. His name is Tex Gunning. And this is a profoundly moving story as well. So I'll just give you a few quotes of how he thinks. And again, he could be sitting in this room giving talks with us and listening. He says, I don't want to live a life creating an illusion of meaningfulness, while deep in my heart I know that every 5 seconds there is a child dying. None of us can pretend anymore. We cannot. He backs up his statement by saying he wants to place the nutritional needs of children in the developing world at the heart of their business mission. Now that is a profound shift. They are changing the purpose of business itself. Unilever is daring to tackle a complex and seemingly intractable human problem in a way that redefines what it means to be a global business and redraw the boundaries between the for-profit, not-for-profit, and governmental sectors of society. He says at the age of 45, he faced a crisis. He had to once again face firing hundreds of workers. And oftentimes when you're faced that, you either do it or you're out of there. And he asked himself, am I going to do this for the rest of my life? Keep firing people, keep restructuring, and keep cutting costs? No, he said. So he decided to learn how to make a business grow and then how to make the workplace a true human community. And he came to understand that these two goals were surprisingly related. So the executives went on these offsites to tackle this problem, to think about it. And he said they then created a unique culture where trust, honesty, and authentic, liberated creativity became the business model. The result was one of the most dramatic business turnarounds on record. Now, this is an example of leadership at several different levels. Average leaders take care of themselves and their families. Good leaders take care of themselves, their families, and some of the community. Great leaders and great companies not only take care of these stakeholders, but also want to change the world. They want to leave the world better than they found it. We have made the choice to have our business intent, he says, become a missionary intent that will make a difference in the lives of Asians who have either health problems, nutritional problems, or well-being problems. And he said the core insight that he got about this, after all these meetings that he had with his executives, was that great leaders, great leadership, and great companies come down to service. So we know that. Okay, you want me to read the last quote? I think it's all right. I think the message got across, yeah. All right.
This is a remarkable man, by the way, but there are others like him who have come to that same place in their lives. They are spiritually developed. A number of people in the companies will say, you know, we just can't keep on doing the same old things and feel good about ourselves. So how can we join the social missions, the environmental missions with our business mission and see what good can come of it? This is a growing movement now. Unilever is one of the pioneers here, but there are others. Okay. We want to talk briefly now about something we mentioned last year, but it's so incredible. It's hard not to talk about it again. This is the work of some of you remember the work of Bill McDonough and Michael Braungart, and it's a focus on what we would call the redesign of the world. What the architect McDonough is doing is been building buildings for several years now with nature in mind. So they're full of light, they're full of fresh air. Rooftops are basically full of grass and greenery. Ducks will land, water will flow, all those kind of wonderful things. Michael Braungart, a chemist, has been able to figure out how can we take a look at the content of any product and select only those ingredients which are healthy, which can be recycled completely back to nature, where waste, the whole concept of waste equals food, is in evidence. So when they get a hold of something, we want to show you maybe just one example, Lars. It's basically the one about Roner Textile. I think it's the fourth one in there.
Number 4.
It's a wonderful story about what they did with this one particular group called Design Tex, which basically makes these fabrics, and their supplier is a company in Switzerland called Roner Textile, trying to figure out, well, how do we do this kind of thing right? So we thought if it goes for us, we'll show you this little excerpt. But this is a sign, I think, of where people are getting into the very heart of matter, of substance, and seeing, can we lift it? Can we take only the good chemicals, only the good products, which can be completely recycled, at least in the biological cycle. The ones in the technical cycle can be recycled forever, hopefully, kind of in a different loop. And materialism, as we understand it, the back is broken when this takes place. It's a much more subtle dealing with products. Is that possible to find that one? Maybe, yeah. Yeah, you never know. I mean, it's...
Right now, with every step we take, we are destroying the world. The rubber in the soles of our shoes contains neurotoxins and carcinogens that are left behind in tiny amounts.
This is good too, but
even a small harmful act, when repeated on...
and I tell you, let me just mention if we can search and find this kind of brief. This is number 4.
DVD number 4.
What's going on here in this DVD called "The Next Industrial Revolution" is 4 or 5 stories. This one, where the soles of shoes, is about Nike and how Nike has basically, with their emphasis, has helped them redesign the soles of sneakers so that there are no more PVCs in the sneakers. They're completely recyclable now. So it's a real source of pride for people in Nike. And one guy says, how good does it feel to bring your kids to where you dispose of the garbage from the company and then they can play in that garbage? It's the whole kind of sense of things. Great story, Nike. We're trying to find this one that's coming up. You never know.
The technical
This
cycle.
is good too, but
That's not it.
In the biological
it's all
cycle,
good. This is an
everything must be
amazing
safe
tape.
for
This is an
consumption by
amazing
living
tape, right?
things. Products must be designed so they can return safe.
let's see, it's about number 30 through, yeah. That's William McDonough, by the way, yeah. This is, yeah, we're getting there. Yeah, we're getting there. Yeah, we're coming along, yeah. Yeah. That's the Nike story there as we zip through it.
It's a great story.
Yeah.
No time.
No time, yeah. Well, let's see. This is Design Tex Roner down there on probably the 4th one could say. Well, what's happened here? Okay, so just to get you set up, the woman in charge, Susan Lyons at Design Tex, is environmentally inspired. She wants to do something with the products. She's embarrassed. She goes to a conference, McDonough and Braungart are talking, and she says, I got an epiphany. Waste equals food. So she calls up McDonough and says, can you do something? And he says, well, let's see what we can do.
Mill specializing in upholstery fabric was struggling to survive.
Keep going.
Yeah. So
Squeezed between
It's a great
competition.
story, but we don't have time.
yeah. So what they do is they go and they talk to Albert Kalin here.
You have high wages, environmental issues, or we have the Alps, we have rivers, we have lakes.
Roner's situation was further complicated by a regulatory problem.
Well, while we hold
Swiss
this one, Lars,
inspectors had pronounced the trimmings from the edges of their looms
Little
to be
further on.
hazardous waste.
what happens here is this company is producing these products, and so bad is the waste that there's no place to dispose of it. It costs too much money.
Where he's talking. Stop.
Okay.
That was
Pretty
it.
close, yeah.
That was it.
That was it?
That was it, yeah.
Can we get that? Yeah.
And, that's not always popular with everyone.
One supplier was critical. The global chemical industry, with over $1.5 trillion in annual sales, supplied the dyes and other chemicals that made modern textiles possible.
Well,
The
so
challenges of technology,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, I'll tell you
We had
that-
this all, by the
the-
way, we had this all pre-planned, and somehow it's not working.
But
It's all right.
the great thing about this story is, so they go and McDonough and Braungart work. They work with Ciba-Geigy. They shame Ciba-Geigy into opening their books to say, here is the actual dyes that we use to make these fabrics. Because they say, we talked to Sumitomo, by the way, and they'll open their books. How about you? And Ciba-Geigy says, well, I guess a small company, they're Swiss just like we are, so we'll do it with you. They found out of 16,000 chemicals, only 16 were non-toxic and could be totally recyclable back to nature. So Roner begins to build all the different fabrics they have with all the colors they have with those 16 different dyes. Takes it back to Design Tex, and there's a competition that goes on in London every year on design. So the story ends with they're up against the redesign of the what's that name? The big place in Germany, the Reichstag, yeah. That and a bunch of other things. And this little textile company wins the prize. It's a great story. And what the guy says is, this is a story of a company that has thought environmentally everything through from the ground up. And so she ends up by saying, what we've done here now is we now have a fabric that we're giving away to anybody who wants the technology. So they give it away. 2 years later, they're at a big environmental design thing. McDonough's there, and she says, okay, folks, here's how we did it. It's all yours. It's not proprietary now. So the technology is now out and about. It's a great story. Can we try the last minute of this tape, maybe? It's kind of a great ending, if we can get that one, too. It's McDonough himself, as those of you who know him have heard him speak, is a philosopher and a little bit of a poet. And so he's able to coin words and phrases which I think capture some of the Christ consciousness in very practical ways. So this is right at the end? Can't do it?
Sheldon, we don't jump around like that. I try to get to the point.
Yeah, okay. Well, it's wonderful, and it really is. But what he says essentially, look, what do we value? You know, do we value children's life, or do we value disease? Do we value intelligence? Do we value stupidity? He goes on like this, and he says, this is the time now for us to make these kind of changes. We have the technology, we have the will to do it, we have great things that can take place. So let's imagine that we can design products that for the next 7 generations, and he begins to show pictures of all these kids, just what he talks about here is this generation of children who are the benefits of these redesigned products. So this is present now, and it's big. So I just want to say that you'll see more about this kind of work, and it's not just limited to McDonough, who's a great spokesperson for it. And lastly,
we'll talk about the Christ consciousness in the field of religion. So, Lars, I'm going to give a couple minutes of conversation about this. Can you set us up for the Olympic closing? You can't.
Yeah.
All right. Well, okay.
But they'll remember this. You all watch television. It's hot,
Yeah. Okay. Good thing for notes. Good thing we have notes. So, DK tells us that one of the conditions for the return of the Christ is the need for the churches to do house cleaning. And part of this has to do with breaking down the walls of separation, the kind of separation that leads to separativism and exclusivism, and the warring conflicts between religions. Now, if the esoteric groups look honestly at ourselves, we have similar issues. And DK has also talked about that. So recently, one of the most exciting developments that we see in the field of religion is what is called the URI, the United Religions Initiative. And we'll hear a lot more about this on Saturday evening from Charles Gibbs. But it was begun in 1995, and we feel that it was inspired by the Christ, given what it's doing, perhaps the Master Jesus to introduce a new kind of dialogue among religious leaders, since this is part of his task in this pre-stage to the reappearance of the Christ. And the URI primary principles are based on respect of each other, respect of the leaders in religion, appreciation, and heartfelt understanding. So the hope has been to unite religious people as a force for addressing the problems of humanity, and their leaders as sources of practical and spiritual wisdom for politicians and other secular leaders. So today, for example, the Dalai Lama is serving in such a capacity. What if this were happening on a grand scale, where solidarity and a common voice for the true needs of all people were the impact and message of the religions, rather than the current strife and intolerance that we see so much of? So this is a great story you're going to hear more about. Another impact of the Christ consciousness is some beginning steps toward the development of the New World religion. We're seeing already a little bit of this with the full moon practices that are happening around the world, which will align us with the natural cycles of the planet. People from the various religious backgrounds come together. It's not just, the New Age people. It's from all different religious groupings. They're coming together to meditate and study the different doctrines. I think a big one for the New Age, as we see it unfolding, and we already see this, is the ritual and ceremony in Aquarius that involves large groups of people and the entire globe. I believe that Christ in the hierarchy is going to use these groups and is going to use ceremony and group movement to evoke beauty, evoke the soul, gather people together, and release these energies into the world through these kinds of gatherings. We see this every year in these conferences. We see it beautiful ceremony that the Tulia spearheads on Sunday mornings, the services. And these are potent, potent opportunities for invocation and evocation. Now, what I wanted to show that we're not going to be able to show, so you're going to have to think back, but it's easy to think back. Do you remember the year 2000? Now, who can forget that, right? And part of the impossibility of forgetting that year is what happened, where east to west and all around the globe, lights were lit up, one after another, after another, after another. And this was televised. This was put on what I would call the radio waves, right? And we've been told that Christ would come, well, Christ would make some of his communication through the radio waves. So here we have computers, we have television, we have all the electronics where Christ present is unfolding in our consciousness. So I personally believe that was some form of a global awakening. DK hasn't written about it yet to confirm it, but I think if he were writing, he would. The magic of it, as I said, was seeing this. This was a sacred, unified global ritual on our television screens. This ritual ceremony included all nations. We participated and witnessed a global event of the dawning light of the new millennium that was both physical and symbolic of one humanity, one world. Imagine all the devas that were working on that day as these bonfires were being lit. The whole world was taken in. I felt, as I watched that, I felt the paradox of feeling smaller in that moment and at the same time connected with the entire planet. And with that powerful entity who stands behind this planet, for it, blessing it, and raising it. Now, every 4 years, similar, not as powerful, but wow, powerful, are the Olympics. They happen every 4 years. They go beyond physical competition and celebration. These too are global rituals. They're celebratory. They're world events of the largest peaceful gatherings in the world. And there was, in the Beacon, September, October 2005, there was an article on the Olympics by Joanne Bakula. And she said, "The Olympics are a living drama of dreams and wishes told in ritual and ceremony, clothed in a unique language of a culture, a gift to the world, and a tribute to the world culture of peace and fellowship." And certainly I really experienced that this year. There's one more quote. Houston Smith said that I think is just remarkable. He said, "When ceremonies really work, they do more than celebrate. They discover and achieve. What they discover is the sacred dimension that is often hidden. What they achieve is a moment of transcendence. Ceremony points to what is divine in the world. And Christ as the forerunner and model for the true human is a great achievement." Now, what we were going to show you, and I apologize that we cannot, but think back, very recent. If you were watching the Olympics, do you remember the very end when these women came down in these white wedding dresses? And they came from everywhere, and it was a camera that showed them from afar. And they began to come together in a formation. And the formation that they created was the peace dove. And it was so beautiful. And then at the very end, they were all holding these lighted lilies. And so from this far perspective, they started at one end, and the entire dove lit up, just went, whew. It was like a living dove. It was just about to take flight. It was so beautiful. And then they did another formation from that into the shape of Torino, so the shape of that country. And then in the circle, in the center, were the 5 rings of the Olympics. So that was the common symbol to all the nations that are coming together, but it was surrounded by the shape of the country that they were manifesting in. So this is a global event, and it's so profoundly beautiful. And you know, as we're trying to recount these stories through our imagination and our memories, you know, when we touch into the Christ consciousness, we see things that we normally do not see. We experience, we intuit things, dimensions, feelings, powers that we normally do not experience. So, of course, that is our potential that unfolds in these kinds of moments.
Read that last quote of Destiny of Nations.
Yeah, okay. So, we're going to read you one last quote and then end with the Arise Today song again that we'd like all of you to sing with us, because we're going to put it on the screen here. So, the last quote. The vision in men's minds today is that of the Aquarian Age, even if they recognize it not. This is straight from DK. Last page, Destiny of Nations. The future will see right relationships, true communion, a sharing of all things, the wine, the blood, the life, and the bread, which is the economic satisfaction, and goodwill. We have also a picture of the future of humanity when all nations are united in complete understanding and the diversity of languages, symbolic of differing traditions, cultures, civilizations, and points of view. They will provide no barrier to right human relations. At the center of each of these pictures is to be found the Christ. And I would like to add that language, where we understand each other without words, that transcends language, is the language of the heart. So, if we could play that, I know that works. And you can follow along and sing, especially towards the middle and the end.
I arise today through the strength of heaven, light of sun, radiance of moon, splendor of fire, speed of lightning, swiftness of wind, depth of the sea, stability of earth, firmness of rock. I arise today through God's strength to pilot me, God's eye to look before me, God's wisdom to guide me, God's way to lie before me, God's shield to protect me from all who shall wish me ill, afar and near, alone and in a
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Thank you for this from the bottom of my heart.